What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 20th episode of the Boundless Business Podcast. I know we finally have a name, and today we have an amazing topic, really talking about raw data and what to do when you have data that isn't clean yet, how to clean it. We'll talk about tools, databases, how to find raw data, and ultimately how to use that in an outbound campaign specifically. Justine, Larissa, good morning. Hello, how are you guys?
Hey, Mika.
Morning,
Doing
doing
good.
good.
It's a fun topic we have because it really talks about more specifically on like acquisition of data. So if this is like new and you don't know what data is or how to do it, we have other podcasts that goes more into depth about, the strategies behind creating a niche and an ICP and how to leverage that in outbound. Now, what we're doing is we're assuming that you already know who you're going after. We're going to be talking about a couple of databases today, and we're going to talk about what to do now that you know who you're going after, how to take that data and apply it. So, Justine, why don't we kick it off with what you have in mind?
Yeah, so I was thinking we could start with this pixel that we've been talking about a lot recently because I feel like we're most excited about that. So we get this raw data from our pixel that we put on our website. What do we do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, for context, I have probably spent hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours now on data acquisition. Larissa has mastered it as well. It's one of the first skills that we actually got when we started our entrepreneur journey was how to acquire the right data. So originally we started on platforms like LinkedIn. Now we've moved on to other databases as well as creating our own pixel to find it. So what Justine's talking about right now is we built a pixel and we talked about it in different episodes. But what we want is I want to find out who's coming to our website. What are they doing? What pages are they visiting? I want to start then understanding, are they a general visitor? Are they a competitor? Or are they someone that is showing intent to buy a solution today? So let's just break down all three of those. One, I was on a call with a prospect or a client yesterday, and we're going through their raw data from their pixel. And we found a really great looking company on paper. And when we looked up that person's LinkedIn, because we get their LinkedIn data, I was like, oh, this is a competitor. And they were on the portfolio page, not to look for anything specific on like, hiring their services, but they were actually snooping on. So it was good to know. But Google would ping that as like, oh, there's people visiting our portfolio page. This is amazing. Now we have a lot more of a insight on like who those people are. The next, there are general visitors. So these are people who hit your homepage, maybe scroll through a couple blogs or articles, and then leave. These people are still good to know because when we started doing it, we actually changed our strategy because we kept getting a lot of people in the credit, repair space, and all of those coming to the website, which isn't our niche. So we're like, okay, they're coming here for a reason why, and we saw what blogs and articles and whatnot they were coming for, so we can suppress those so we can only start bringing traffic that's relevant to us, because visitors are fine, but that's not data that we can use. And ultimately, the last one is people who show intent. I'm talking about, they fit your ICP to a T. They are a business in the South with 1 million in revenue, 2 employees, whatever your niche is, they fit that. And now we can understand what pages they were visiting. So this client I was talking to yesterday, we built a campaign because they're a HubSpot partner and there's a specific blog related to what they were doing. So it was an analytics platform, right? That leverages HubSpot. So really quickly, we were able to build a very filtered list of first names, last names, email addresses, company profiles, LinkedIn, and all those to build custom outreaches to those people, these warm individuals who are coming to a business blog about analytics. Now, unless you're Larissa, me, or Justine, and on your Saturday mornings at 6 a.m., you're reading about B2B prospecting tools, you're probably in market for it. And there's other ways to score it. But now we have this raw data. Like I said, the first name, last name, email, phone number, LinkedIn's, email, all these points. And now we can actually put them into a campaign. But that's the type of raw data that we want to show intent, right? And then competitors and general visitors, we can do other things with. And I'm happy to explore those. Like I was thinking about, oh, competitor reach out where we partner because they don't do X. So that's really high level on the pixel side of like getting raw data. I don't know, Larissa, if you have anything to add to raw data.
Oh, I always have things to add. I feel like it's important to kind of note sort of what makes data so important and why we even want to spend like our whole morning really talking about it in this way. And I think it's important to kind of take outbound and simplify it, right? Like outbound marketing is simple. It comes down to three things: data, message, and like response management, essentially.
Four things: offer,
Four things.
niche, message.
Well, I would say offer, I would lump that in with message.
Okay.
Okay, four things. But even still, like data is at the heart of this because it doesn't matter if you are like hitting it out of the park literally everywhere else. If your offer is awesome, if your message is awesome, if your really great responses, like you're really good at all those things, it doesn't matter. Genuinely, like, because data is your top layer. This is the most important piece to get right, which is why we want to spend a lot of time about this. So to kind of add on to sort of what Nico was mentioning, like the reason we're really excited about like website pixels and things along those lines, particularly like the one that we are seeing really cool results from, is because data is so important. And because if you are able to tell, like Nico was saying, like intent and also like basic information about like who it is, if this person is on your site, they know about you already. That's a way easier open than going to somebody like totally cold. Like that's a much harder transition. And so like that's something also worth considering about your data, is like, what is the data actually telling you? And the data source you have is a really important piece in being able to tell you about those things, right? If you're pulling a list, and we're going to talk about Apollo, which is a really popular database platform, and that's the reason why we pitched that particular one. There's lots of other databases out there. If you pull a list from a database, those people still have no reference on you. So that is like truly, truly cold. The difference between that and like a website pixel really is that you can still get much of the database information. The reason being is that pixels like these like are at like a high technical level, like connected to most of these databases in one way or another, or separate ones that they are able to fill in those gaps for you. But it runs, not only does it run on autopilot, it also runs and tells you again who already does know about you. Like it's not a cold open. It's I would argue it's more warm, and thus you have like a better chance of actually transferring those leads into closed sales. So high level, we want to talk about like you get raw data from Pixel. Where do you take it? Like what do you do with it? So Nico, what does somebody do with this data?
Yeah, so there's really only a handful of things that you can do. One, I'm a huge fan of cold calling. I used to hate it not too long ago. Now, if I know that someone's on a specific page, I use a very simple script not to freak them out. My script is, hey name, my name is Nico from Boundless Media. I'm networking with people in, and then because every pixel is a little different, ours shows the exact location and city that they're in. So let's say it's Philadelphia. I'm looking to network with intercompany like industry, right? Roofers. So I'll just keep going. Hey Jim, my name's Nico. I'm looking to network with roofers in Philadelphia. Open and chatting, and you can repeat that on a sales call, on a LinkedIn outreach, on a Facebook outreach, on an email outreach. So there's really so much you can do with that. I'm a huge fan of let's call them if we have the number. Let's reach out on social media, and then last, let's email them.
So with that, right, like we and the strategy that would be best to take certainly varies by every business, every niche, and all of those things. Like some people it may be best to just email right away. Some people it may be best to call. So like it depends really on who they are, what you're doing, and all of those pieces.
Absolutely.
The next biggest piece, and I would argue actually maybe this is a more important piece than what you do with the data, but how do you clean and verify that data? How do we clean and verify pixel data?
Yeah, so again, every pixel is different. I'm just going to assume that we're talking about hours. So hours already validates the email, the LinkedIn, social, whatnot. But let's say that you get a pixel, and there's a bunch of them online, and you get this raw data. First thing I would do, go to bulk email checker, put all the emails in there. Again, the phone numbers, it's pretty easy to see if they're a real number or not. Right. I've used Seamless and scraped phone numbers, and I'm like, yeah, a number doesn't have 5 digits. As much as you want it to have 5 digits, it just doesn't, right?
Yeah, that's probably their extension. One quick note about phone numbers: always check a do not call list.
Yep. Yeah. And there's so many rules in there, but yeah. So that's email, and same with socials, right? It's pretty easy to see if those. There's no like tool that you can import a list into, but again, if you see if it's valid, you can scroll over if it's in Excel, and it'll pop up like a preview. And if it says error 404, it doesn't exist and it's not real. But then again, you put that into a LinkedIn outbound tool. There's no Facebook outbound tools that I really like, so I wouldn't recommend that or Twitter. But
Cool. Yeah. Do we want to move on to Apollo?
sure. There's, and again, like I said, Apollo, RPixel, and like 16 other databases is what we use basically when we're compiling data. But Apollo is really nice for a multitude of reasons. It's really clean UI. It has pretty good filters, right? So what I'm looking for often is like company size, very accurate, location, very accurate, domain, like the actual website URL, accurate. It's not accurate is revenue, which I know a lot of people use as a metric. Like, hey, I'm looking for a business doing 5 million a year in revenue. It's really, really bad at that. Industry, it's really average on, much like Sales Navigator's average on that. So I, rather than looking for like industries like software development, I'll look for keywords like staff augmentation rather than industry or Java or something like that. So those are a couple of examples on their, oh, and their hiring one is really good too. So their hiring filter. But again, and I do this, it's I can actually show this because it doesn't actually impact anything. So if you're watching, you will see my screen in a second. If you're not watching, I will walk through this. But we have a client. They are reaching out to a more agriculture sector, right? So out of 1,200, Justine, how many verified emails did Apollo that? And again, I clicked the verify button on Apollo. How many of 1,200 were actually verified?
I would hope it's all 1,200, but I know it's probably not.
Yeah, it is. It is not. It is not great. It's not bad either. I've seen worse numbers, but if you can see my screen, basically out of the 1,253 people, right, 736 of those were valid, 76 failed, and then 441 are like on that iffy stage. So that's a huge difference, right? So we could have been emailing 500 people that could have bounced, no longer at the company, all those things, right? And this is average. I mean, Larissa, I don't know, you and I clean data a lot. Like this is pretty decent, right?
I mean, yes, I would also even take this with a grain of salt because I feel like we would probably oftentimes check things multiple times. So I would say like by the time we run it through like 2 email checking databases, let's say, that number is going to be even lower. Like that's one thing that's really important, I feel like, to consider with data is like data shrinkage. Like the first list you pull, let's say of 100, you are not getting 100 good people in that list. It like unless you literally go through and hand pick every single one, you are not getting a good list out of 100. If you go to a database and you're, applying filters, you say, okay, everybody who meets X, Y, Z conditions, just the database will tell me who they are. You have some bad data in there, like almost guaranteed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you just have to clean that data. So what we mean by cleaning the data is taking out everyone who's not a good fit in one reason or another. They could be not a good fit, let's say just logistically, like what Nika was just sharing. If they don't have a verified email, don't email them.
Yeah.
You're wasting your effort, you're spinning your wheels, you're damaging your email domain. It's not worth it, right? Let's say they also don't meet you want people to meet a certain revenue criteria. And these databases, like, you do have to take everything they give you with a grain of salt. It's not always accurate. And I mean, it can't be, it won't be, like, that's just inevitable. So that's, I feel like, very important to keep in mind, that like out of a list of 100, what you can realistically expect to actually get and use, I would cut it in half on average. If you're doing really good with your data, I would say like you'll maybe be able to get 75% of it. But again, it just really depends so much on the like who actually meets the criteria. Because the reason data is so valuable is because it allows you to scale your outbound. So that's awesome. We love that. However, for you to scale your outbound effectively, you have to use things like databases. So that would be Apollo, Sales Navigator, Seamless. You know, there's 10 million different databases out there, many of which, even if you're not familiar with, you probably have heard of in one way or another. They will all give you bad data. And it's not the fault of the tool. It's really more of like, they can't give you every single filter you need, and they can't answer those 100% accurately. So oftentimes you'll see, especially like industries, if you only want people in a certain industry, the industries you should take with a grain of salt. Like the data you're getting from a database or, you know, anywhere could very well be wrong. You could have, let's say, and it can be like a nuanced difference. So let's say you have like a cosmetic producer, manufacturer, and maybe you want to reach like cosmetic e-commerce businesses. That's like a fine line, but a pretty important distinction. Like you want to know who's the end seller, the end target. Like, is it a consumer? Is it a business? Like, how do they do all this? Let's say you focus on like e-commerce ads. Well, it's not really advantageous for you to reach out to cosmetic manufacturers. It is advantageous for you to reach out to cosmetics like sellers, if that makes sense, like that differentiation. So that's another thing that, like, no matter what you're doing, if you are doing outbound at scale and you're using any database or pixels or anything, like your data will shrink a lot. And it really is just, you have to go through and you have to go through the data. You have to go through every single line and figure out, like, is this an issue? Which is really hard to do if you're pulling lists of like thousands, right? So I do recommend pulling like smaller lists personally, but that could very much be biased because we typically do like small batch outbound. So it's slightly different than like a mass market approach. Well, really different, not slightly different.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is what you put in your body, you get out. You know, if you don't work out, you probably won't look as great, right? And that, yes, there are the 3% exceptions. So if you put in good data, you will get good results, which means you will often make more money. Put in bad data, there's still a chance you'll do fine, but you're hedging your bets that you're not going to do fine. So long story short, put good in, get good out, make more money. I think that should be the end of the pod. Justine, what else do you have?
Yeah, that was kind of all the questions I had. Just, yeah, reiterating how important that background work is, like, even before you start getting data, like defining your niche and all that really does impact the data that you get and the success of your campaign. So anything else you guys want to add before we wrap it up?
No, if you have any questions about data sources or anything, I'm happy to jump on the call and show you kind of what you know, the back end looks like of what we do and how you can borrow it and all that fun stuff. So if you have any questions about installing the pixel, like I said, you can start getting leads almost immediately from that. So we don't cost an arm and a leg, you know. So you go getbalancedmedia.com. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast, and we'll talk real soon. Cheers.